And boom, we're into our first spaceship. There will be more.
It's mad, just like that.
Yeah, you can just see into this invisible spectrum. It's a framework that allows you to use all these cool Wi-Fi hacking tools and techniques that are out there without actually needing to do the command line work on pretty much any of them. Look at all the stuff you can do.
We do not advocate anything illegal. This is for educational purposes only. Hey everyone, David Bombal back with Kody. Kody, welcome.
Glad to be back. That last interview was really fun.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And just for people who don't know Kody, he's the co-creator of these fantastic little devices. He's also really well known for being on the Nullbyte channel.
Hi, I'm Kody, the editor of Nullbyte.
You've got a new channel, is that right? Give us a bit of an update.
That's right. So I go live every week, twice a week on the Security Forward channel. Welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. I also am on the Hack5 channel. Today, we're going to learn how to phish Windows users on this episode of Hackbyte. If you like what was going on Nullbyte, you can always see the same thing on Hack5.
In our previous video, which I've linked below, we spoke about the Wi-Fi Nugget and the USB Nugget. So if you want to see more details about these, have a look at the video below. Kody's going to demonstrate a whole bunch of tools in this video. We've put a menu below. So if you want to jump to a specific tool, then go directly to that part of the video. But tease us, what are you going to show us in this video?
We're going to go over a lot of different things you can do with Wi-Fi hacking. And we're going to start out with the cheapest and most passive. They're very sneaky attacks that really don't cost that much money to do. We're going to go all the way up to attacks that are much more noisy and sophisticated and could potentially even manage to break into a vulnerable Wi-Fi network in about 15 seconds.
You're going to show some of your tools. I think Airgeddon is one of your favorites, right?
Yes, I have a complicated relationship with Airgeddon, but it is definitely one of my favorite Wi-Fi hacking tools. In addition to that, we're also going to show some microcontroller-based Wi-Fi hacking tools. So we'll be covering both ones that require like a Linux computer, like this Raspberry Pi, and also ones that you can pick up for about $1.80, and you can do on virtually any computer.
We had feedback on our previous video where people were saying like some of the devices that we showed, you were showing some like big alpha adapters that cost a lot of money. People always complain, you know, they want to do 5 gigahertz, but like you said, you know, for beginners, it's a pain to get them to work. So yeah, let me ask you a nasty question while we're here. But you can definitely buy this kind of stuff for like $1.80, if you buy it from AliExpress. But you can also get it like for $4 from Amazon. So I'm really glad that you're showing us, you know, low cost solutions and low cost options to hack.
And some of the juiciest things we're going to be covering today can run on these really low cost solutions. So, you know, we're going to be talking about things like finding out where people have been based on the devices, the Wi-Fi devices stored in their phones. So it's going to be a really interesting adventure through what you can do with a very small amount of money and then kind of ramping it up to more advanced attacks.
Cool, let's get started.
There's lots of different things you can do for Wi-Fi hacking. And when people are like, hey, can you hack Wi-Fi, or can you hack my Wi-Fi, or can you hack my neighbor's Wi-Fi? Yep. They often mean totally different things. Some people mean, can you kick my neighbor's devices off so it doesn't work for them anymore? Because they're like playing music on a Wi-Fi connected speaker and I hate it. Another might mean, oh, I want to break into this Wi-Fi network, or I've been locked out, I forgot my password or whatever. Can you get into the Wi-Fi network? And then other people might mean, can you actually break into devices or start messing with devices individually rather than messing with an access point at all? So when people say, I want to hack Wi-Fi, they might be talking about a device like a cell phone that uses Wi-Fi, or they might be talking about like a router or something like an access point. I would say in 80% of the cases, people are talking about how do I get a Wi-Fi password? That's what most people want, right? You know, like access to a Wi-Fi network. One of the cheapest ways that I know in 2022 of doing this is to be able to phish a user.
Oh no. Mr. Krabs told me all about you.
There's a reason that phishing is so popular in literally everything. It's phishing for, you know, your corporate accounts, your email accounts. Phishing is so easy to do. So in this case, if you can take something super cheap, like this little ESP8266, these cost about $1.80. You can get them on AliExpress. They come super easy to flash with these pre-made projects. And what they basically do is allow you to mimic an access point. And you can see on this GitHub repository, this is a free project that somebody made in Arduino. I actually have it up and I've made some modifications to it for a video we're going to be doing soon on Warshipping. Our Warshipping episode is what would happen if you decided to attack a company by trying to get their Wi-Fi credentials by mailing something to them that's to the wrong, like a wrong name or something, and it stayed in their mailroom for like 5 days or something like that. And any employee who was like, hey, look, there's a free guest network. That's convenient. The signal's pretty strong, and tries to connect to it, possibly be thinking they're supposed to log in in order to use that guest network and maybe giving up their corporate credentials or the Wi-Fi credentials to the network they already know. It's surprising how effective these sorts of attacks can be, even though they're passive. And this is a completely passive attack we're going to talk about first, because there's actually an active version of this that is much more nefarious and also arguably illegal. So is it illegal to send a package to a company that contains a little access point like this that really looks like an open Wi-Fi network? It's really incredible how realistic this looks. Right now, if I were to take a look at the various networks that are available, I would see I have a Varonis guest network. That's interesting. I don't remember being near a Varonis office. Like, isn't that in New York? Turns out that I am running this very program in Arduino IDE, and this is the code that I'm using. And I've just very lightly modified this and added kind of like phishing veneer over it to make it look as though this is a real guest network that if you were in the office or something, you could connect to get easy access. Maybe you're new and you don't have the Wi-Fi credentials yet, or there's some other reason why. Maybe the signal strength is stronger and you're having difficulty with the normal network. This is a totally passive attack that just spins up an access point and waits for people to misidentify this and potentially put in information. I'm going to attempt to connect to it, Varonis guest Wi-Fi. And we can see this is an insecure network, and boom, this phishing page just popped up. This is $1.80, and this looks pretty good, I have to say. I worked all weekend on this. It has terms and conditions, looks very legit. It looks as though this is the kind of access point you would see for any open guest network where it's presumed that you work there or you have permission to be using it. But if you were to put in your credentials here, I can just type this in, click sign in, and it's like, congratulations, it's validating. Your account is being validated. Please allow up to 5 minutes. That's so mean, because this is never going to give you Wi-Fi access. But if I were then to go to, this access point /creds, I could see all the different credentials that had been logged to this device. It's also possible to make this persistent, so it stores those credentials. So even if the battery were to die and to run out over time, as soon as this box were shipped back to me, I would have every different employee's credentials that had accidentally logged into this. In order for this episode to be pretty well researched, we shipped out a bunch of trackers, tile trackers, to a variety of different companies to see what they would do. And the average was to leave it in the mailroom for several days. We sent this to an auto manufacturer and it is still there. It has been 5 weeks or so since we sent it. It might have been that they just destroyed it for some reason. The last time it was spotted was inside their mailroom, and it appears as though they just brought it in and kind of left it there. If this was an attack that was relying on a long duration of being out there, then this is the most passive and kind of sneaky thing I can think of that might lure the average person or the average employee who's having a little bit of trouble with the normal Wi-Fi network to try this other Wi-Fi network that seems to have trusted proximity. It's inside the office with them. Why would there be a malicious network inside the office? Who would get in there and plug in a router? But it doesn't work that way anymore. These tiny little microcontrollers are capable of making these really convincing phishing access points and phishing pages that come along with them. So before we even get into wireless network adapters and Linux and stuff, you can just download Arduino, download this program, change a couple things, and make a really good phishing page. We're not even talking about the computer science stuff here. We're really just talking about what is the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to Wi-Fi hacking. Well, if you're talking about getting a password, probably phishing with a really, really simple low-cost device that, is so cheap that it doesn't really matter if you never see it again. I would, under these terms, not want to send a Raspberry Pi that cost me $150 on eBay today to, a company and have them rip it open and be like, what's this? Whereas if it were this little thing, this actually costs less than the tile tracker when fully assembled with a lithium polymer ion battery. I was really impressed by this little prototype. I have to say, this is probably, as far as I know, the cheapest way of getting a Wi-Fi password that I know of.
We had some comments on our previous video, David, where can I get such a cheap Wi-Fi adapter? And I'm glad you did this update and show how it actually works. You literally buy it from AliExpress and then you just flash it from GitHub, right?
Yep, that's correct. It's gotten so simple that you can do the flashing through a Chrome web browser. And I actually did the presentation at the Hope conference on exactly how this works, what's the best ESP8266 baseboard to buy. You can check that out on my Twitter. To anybody who's looking to buy their first ESP8266, the D1 Mini is probably the way you want to go. That's the one I'm talking about when I'm talking about this being available for $1. There's cheaper ones that don't involve a USB connector, but good luck as a beginner trying to connect to something that just requires you to connect via a bunch of pins or something. Much, much easier to get the integrated board.
So you could buy that from Amazon, but it's cheaper to buy it from AliExpress kind of thing, right?
You pay for your time, if you're in a major city, you can probably get one delivered tomorrow on Amazon, but you'll expect to pay maybe $4 for it. But if you get one on AliExpress, you'll get it in 3 weeks, but it'll be $1.80. So we talked about this passive attack, and I want to use the same platform, but upgrade it a little bit to be like, all right, what if you are a more advanced user and you're just like, this is baby stuff. I know I can create a fake access point. I want to get to more active attacks where I'm actually able to like shepherd people from a trusted access point over to a fake access point and do some other really advanced things. So I had the pleasure of working with a creator named Spacesoon, aka Stefan, who created the ESP8266 Deauthor. Now you'll typically see this in like its wristwatch implementation, and we actually support it on our Wi-Fi Nugget. In fact, I have one in front of me that has been flashed with this right now, and it's really cute to be able to use the screen and buttons to be able to select access points and either attack them or clone them or do some other basic Wi-Fi attacks using just a button and screens. And in fact, that's the basis of our Wi-Fi Nugget, is to be able to do most of that just using a button and screen. But what if you want to move beyond that and you're just like, okay, I know that I can clone a Wi-Fi network. I know I can kick devices off, but like, can I do more interesting things? Can I do like Wi-Fi research with this thing the same way that I might want to do with a wireless network adapter? And the answer is yes, absolutely. When I was working with Stefan, I made a specific request that I really wanted to be able to do some cool like phishing things. And even though it was awesome that the original Wi-Fi Deauthor has a web access point that you can connect to that gives you a menu to be able to do all this interesting stuff on any device with Wi-Fi. So you can connect with your phone to this little ESP8266 and do some more advanced attacks. If you get rid of that kind of like friendly, beginner-friendly, like helpful Wi-Fi interface and instead have it available as a phishing interface or as an attack interface, suddenly you can do much more advanced things than the original version of the Wi-Fi Deauthor allows for. So the V3 or version 3 of the ESP8266 Deauthor, I think is one of the best Wi-Fi hacking tools that people don't know about. I had the pleasure of working on this project and trying to make it as mean and as interesting as possible based on research that I was actively doing. This has some features packed into it that you cannot do in the original version of the Wi-Fi Deauthor. To get here, it's kind of sneaky. There's a drop-down menu on the GitHub for the Wi-Fi Deauthor, and the V2 is the default version of this, and this is the one that most people know. You know, it's maintained, but you can see there is a difference here in the two versions. In the version 2, you have a web interface, display support, serial command line, that's great, a scanner, Deauth attack, beacon attack, and probe attack. That's great. Like all those things are very wonderful. But the V3 has these additional features. It can also do support for a serial command line interface, signal strength scanner, so you can use this as a fox hunting tool. So let's say that you detect somebody on your network that's not supposed to be here. You could use this tool to hunt down exactly who is connecting to your network without authorization. So if that's one of your neighbors, for example, you could use this tool to hunt down exactly who is behind that intrusion into your network. Or if you're at like an Airbnb and you're scanning and you're like, that's an unusual device. Like, I don't remember that being connected to this network. Or like, maybe that manufacturer is a little suspicious. Maybe it's a camera. You would be able to track down every device that's connected to the main access point by proximity and signal strength. So this has real value as a fox hunting tool. And for, again, $1.80, it gives you the ability to find the location or localize the location of basically any access point or any client of any access point around you. And that I think is super cool because it means that there's no more mystery as to the location of one of these Wi-Fi devices. You can walk around until the signal strength spikes up and gets really, really strong and know, okay, I've found approximately where this thing is. There's also an authentication scanner. This means that you can get different Wi-Fi devices to give up the secret of where they've been in the past. And this is research I worked on with a technique called a beacon swarm. In the previous version of the Wi-Fi Deauthor, you were able to create fake Wi-Fi networks or the appearance of fake Wi-Fi networks by sending out beacon frames. Beacon frames are basically a giant billboard that says, hi, I'm this Wi-Fi network, this is my name, I am on this channel, and I support these various speeds. And that is why your phone, when you're in a new place, is able to tell you what Wi-Fi networks are around you. Any device that's Wi-Fi capable can put out beacon frames, and they don't need to be truthful. There's no validation, there's nothing to prove that it's actually a real Wi-Fi network. The previous version of the Wi-Fi Deauthor was able to create up to 100 fake networks, and originally they were a Rickroll. So Stefan had programmed it to be like, never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you. And I thought that was really funny, but I was like, what if instead I programmed in 100 of the most common open Wi-Fi networks in an area? So that's going to be like Starbucks Wi-Fi, any like major chains, McDonald's Wi-Fi. First, I wardrove around the Los Angeles area. I got like tens of thousands of Wi-Fi networks. And then I went through that list and I found the most common open Wi-Fi networks and made a list of those and started broadcasting them. And what I found is that nearby devices that had been connected to those open networks before would attempt spontaneously to connect to them. Now, this serves two important purposes. It allows me to identify where they've been in the past. Each user's experience is like a fingerprint. So if you've been to like McDonald's and then like, KFC and then Motel 6 and then a couple other ones, that's probably going to be unique to your device. And I can use that to build a fingerprint and de-anonymize devices around me by being able to track them by which open networks they've connected to in the past. So if I find 5 open networks that you've connected to in the past, I can build a profile where if I ping out those 5 fake networks and your device responds to all of them, I know pretty assuredly that that's you. Even though your device might be doing things like MAC address randomization and trying to hide, I can continue to track you by putting out all these fake Wi-Fi networks and paying very careful attention to which networks your individual device responds to. That also means if there's any sensitive places you've been to, let's say you're an employee at a defense contractor. Let's say you've been to a strip club and you're not supposed to. If you've connected to the Wi-Fi there and somebody starts broadcasting a fake version, your phone is going to sell you out. And the only way to prevent that is to go into your phone and delete those stored networks that are in there.
I'm not sure about the defense contractor and then a strip club. I don't know what those are going to do with each other, but I'll take your word for it, Kody.
All right, so the second important thing here is if I am able to probe your device, your phone or your laptop for open networks you've joined in the past, that means that I can force you to basically join that open network. Because if I present a real version of that network, not just these beacon frames that say, hey, I'm a network with nothing behind it, but a real network that's possible to be joined, then I can start doing some really interesting attacks. So if I'm a hacker and I have a Raspberry Pi or something that like can do DNS spoofing and all this like advanced stuff, all I need to do perhaps is probe a target device for any open network they've joined in the past. Hotel networks, guest setup networks, generic places that you would be in public, like concerts, like that sort of thing. If you can find these sorts of open networks in someone's phone, you can force them to join that network and you can own their data flow, which means you can redirect them to phishing pages, you can make pop-ups appear on their screen, you can do all sorts of bad stuff because you own their data connection. When they try to navigate to a website, you can be like, no, and then navigate them elsewhere. If you use these attack tools together, for example, like a V3 Deauther running on an ESP8266, this super cheap thing, with a Raspberry Pi that's capable of more advanced attacks, once you can herd someone onto your malicious fake network, you can actually pick a device, probe it for vulnerable networks that it's connected to in the past, and then spin up that exact network and start doing interesting attacks to find out like what applications are they running on their phone. Can I redirect a web request? Can I downgrade a web request and start like sending phishing pages instead? All this stuff becomes possible once you identify open networks that somebody's connected to in the past. So it's not just about like tracking someone by which networks they've seen in the past. It's not just about identifying them specifically if they've maybe been somewhere interesting, like they work somewhere really important that I'm targeting, or they've been somewhere that they're not supposed to go. It's also about, can I spin up a fake malicious network and then seize control of their data connection from whatever access point they were on before. So the last thing really here that I think is cool is the rogue access point. Being able to create an actual joinable access point, I can take the final step in this attack and initiate a phishing attack. So this is the official way of connecting to it. I also pushed very hard for a demo mode. So I think we probably will still have to blur like a little bit of something, but this is what it actually looks like. If you've never heard of this, then I'm connected over serial right now to an ESP8266 with the V3 Deauther flashed to it, and I can just type help and see all the various things that I'm able to access on this. Look at all the stuff you can do. One of the best commands is just chicken, which just does this to make sure that everything's working properly. And I always say this is for morale. All the other commands here are really cool. So the demo mode is supposed to hide the MAC addresses here and make it a little easier for people that are using this for research to show off what they're doing without doxing themselves. But this actually does really cool things like identifying the device by MAC address. So it can identify the hardware vendor and look it up and present that to you. So as the researcher or the hacker, you're able to see more information about which device you're targeting. Is it a printer? Is it a camera? Is it a HP laptop? Depending on what it is, you're probably going to want to approach this a little bit differently. You can target different types of scans. So you can target on a specific channel. And for now, this only covers 2.4 gigahertz. So that's the big limitation of all the attacks we've talked about so far, is only 2.4. If your target migrates over to a 5 gigahertz network, you're pretty much done. There's not really much you can do with this attack, but let's go ahead and run a scan. So if I want to run a scan and I'm not specific, it'll do a scan for access points, and it will do a scan also for clients. And you can see here it's coming up with Apple devices, a Roku device, and I can also start seeing probe requests. So I can see the various networks that nearby Wi-Fi clients, like phones or other pieces of Wi-Fi equipment, are reaching out for. We used to have a long time ago Starlink, and these devices remember that, and they're still reaching out for that Starlink network. So if I wanted to, I could create a fake Starlink network with the same kind of setup as the old ones, and I know that these devices would automatically connect. So already this scan has told me more information about my wireless environment, which is really cool. And you can see like some of this has been like starred out, which makes it a little bit harder for people to dox themselves. So when I look at stations, these are Wi-Fi clients. These are things that are connecting to access points. I can see we have Espressif devices. So this is actually one of the various devices we have around here. I think it's probably one of our light setups, but I'm able to pick out like IoT devices versus like TP-Link devices, which would be like a router or a switch or something versus an Intel device, just by looking at the MAC address and running a scan here. So if I'm a hacker that wants to attack one device but leaves all the other devices alone, this means I can run a surgical attack that all this again is command line, is over the serial. If I'm somebody who's graduated from, just using the screen interface on the Wi-Fi Deauther, I've had my like Deauther wristwatch and like I'm over it. This is a whole new world of different attacks you can do in order to lure a device in. The Wi-Fi phishing attack that we showed before was passive, and we can totally do that on this as well. If I type help, so if I want to learn more information about a specific command, in this case, the access point command, I can type help AP, and I can see if I want to make a specific access point, I can type AP and then add the value that I want the SSID to be or the name of the Wi-Fi network. And then if I don't add anything else, if I don't specify the channel or the security or anything, it'll just be an open Wi-Fi network. And I've basically done the exact same thing that the first tool we showed was doing, because this will by default display a little phishing page. So if I wanted to spice this up and make this not a passive attack anymore, then what I can do is I can make this look as though it is a router that is updated. And I can make an open version of an existing Wi-Fi network and then kick everybody off of that Wi-Fi network. In their confusion, they're gonna, look to see like, why can't I join the Wi-Fi network? Why am I being kicked off? And see an open network with the same name as the network they were just connected to, their router. And when they click on that, they're going to be directed to a phishing page that says, hey, we've just downloaded an update. Please enter your password to reboot the router and apply the update. They'll enter their password. And what this will actually be able to do, if I want to, is have it take that password and attempt to use it to connect to the real router, the real access point. And if it doesn't work, the access point will come back and say, sorry, that's the wrong password. And because it seems like this phishing page knows the difference between the real password and a fake password, they're like, oh, well, I'm just being paranoid. Obviously, this thing is just the router, applying an update or whatever. And it's not like someone attacking me because it knows when I give it a fake password. I actually got hit by this attack one time, and I was very surprised, and I typed in, a totally random password and it didn't work. So I just assumed, oh, this is really the router. But that's kind of the trick about this attack, is the ability to validate whether or not that password was real. This is a more advanced or active way of doing the prior attack that we just did, but by using the command line, we're able to de-authenticate devices as well as create that phishing page. And that's really the difference between an active and a passive phishing attack. Is this active attack really pushes clients from the safe network they were already connected to this fake network by denying them the ability to access the router or the access point they were using for work or for whatever they were doing. I love this attack because it's so diabolical, and it really does use all the abilities of this little microcontroller. It's using the ability to create that Wi-Fi interface where, it pops up a web interface and makes it look really good. It's using its ability to send arbitrary packets to create the access point and also to kick the user off of the access point they were on prior. This is my number one, I think, underrated Wi-Fi hacking tool that people don't know about, because if you use this, for example, in conjunction with Wireshark on like a Raspberry Pi, then we get into some really advanced attacks. What you can do is you can start out by having a device that is an unknown Wi-Fi device, hit it with a bunch of fake networks, get it to try to connect back with you to one of these access points that you're advertising. And then when it tries that, you can use Wireshark to capture the hashed version of the password that's stored inside the device. This is called a half handshake attack. In Wireshark, when the victim device attempts to connect, I capture that, run it through a cracking program, and if the password is weak, or if I just have a lot of power behind that attack, I can get like your home Wi-Fi password or your office Wi-Fi password just by advertising it on this little microcontroller and then listening in on a system that maybe it can't do packet injection, it can just do listening.
If you show us the help again, is there a specific command to do this attack that you just mentioned?
Yep, so the AP command is the one that creates the access point that's actually joinable and will automatically route whoever joins it to a little phishing page. And then the Deauth command is the one that will kick devices off the network. So you can actually make compound commands. And if you are interested in this, we actually did an hour-long deep dive into this. It's called Wi-Fi Phishing for Passwords with Cheap Microcontrollers. And I believe I have here the command that I use to actually run this attack. And it is Deauth and then whatever the station number is. When it does the scan, it gives you a number for each device. In this case, I was attacking target number 0, the first one. 2 semicolons allows you to do compound commands. So basically run 2 commands at the same time on this, which again is super cool and very scriptable. So if you have an attack you really like, you can often script it with these semicolons and introduce like pauses or delays. That I think is really interesting, that you can script these sorts of attacks and make them very predictable. So in this case, yes, by using the AP and the Deauth command together, I can kick a device off of one network while advertising a second network. In this case, that just says fake net. And this would have no password on it. It would just be designed to entice them into joining and thinking that their router was, you know, doing some sort of update.
That's great. So I'll link that video below. So in that video, you show all those commands.
Oh yeah, it's an hour long, but don't worry, it has chapters. So if you just want to skip to the interesting parts of getting the phishing page live, it's very easy to go through that thanks to our editor, Michael.
These attacks that you've shown up to this point, that's like $1.80 thing, or
Yes.
$4 if you buy it on Amazon. So it's really cheap to do this, right?
Yep. So there's a lot of different devices that will support this attack. Anything that has an ESP8266 in it and has the ability to flash to, you're pretty much good to go. Of course, there's various other tools you can get that also help support us. So if you want to help support our content creation, we don't have a Patreon. We actually just make hardware, and our Wi-Fi Nugget does in fact support the V3 Deauther. Or if you want to make this yourself, the designs are open source. However, it is an absolute pain in the ass. So good luck with that. Like dedicate at least 2 months of pain and suffering to it. But yes, it is open source. So if you want to make it yourself and you think that the price is too high, you can always do it yourself and find out where the money goes.
If I want to save money, I can get it for $1.80 or $4 also, but it's going to be a bit of pain to set it up. Or I can get a Wi-Fi Nugget, and it just makes it easier, right?
Exactly. And what I think is cool is like there's a dichotomy here. When you have this microcontroller, if you connect it to something like the Wi-Fi Nugget that has like the screen and buttons and like all this other nice stuff, then it really means that you have the ability to use this on the go. You can plug it into your computer and without doing any of this command line stuff, do 80% of the stuff that this can do, with the exception of the more advanced things like the phishing and like detecting what access point someone's connected to before. But if you're a researcher, if you're advanced, if you want to like take the next step, then you can take this tool, flash it with a community project that allows you to go even further, and then suddenly be able to do these advanced attacks that, you know, don't involve the screen and buttons, because frankly, like with four buttons and a tiny little screen, there's just not enough information to do some of these more dense attacks, like creating the fake access point or like figuring out if someone's been to the strip club when they're not supposed to. I keep bringing up that example. It's actually
I'm a bit worried about you, Kody. Yes.
Yeah, like it's the only time I've really run this live was I used it as a JPL employee detector. So anytime somebody from NASA's Jet Propulsion Labs showed up, it would like set off a little like light show and like do a little noise. And I thought they're just like, well, how does it know that I work there? And then I got to do a presentation on how I was unmasking them as JPL employees. So I've never actually used it for that, but I do use that example a lot because I think it's funny. It's like a common man example where they're like, well, I've never been anywhere people would, you know, worry about. And I was like, wait, I did connect to that strip club network at one time.
Tell me, do you have videos covering the Wi-Fi Nugget? Because we kind of spoke about it in high-level terms, but do you have like detailed videos showing like a whole bunch of these attacks? Or was it on Hack 5? Where can people find stuff? I'll put links below, but if you can just tell us where, if you've got videos going through the different attacks.
Hack 5 is the best place to go for videos on the Wi-Fi Nugget and the USB Nugget, also sometimes called the Rubber Nugget. That's where we put out our tutorial style videos. They're the best way to get introduced to most of these topics because they're like an 8 to 10 minute long video on how to get started, get set up on one of these projects from basically square one. If you are freshly getting a Wi-Fi Nugget, or if you want to see what they're capable of, I highly recommend Hack 5 as your source. We've done a couple streams where we cover the Nugget, but they're much longer. So if you're somebody that wants to just, get to the features and like see how they work and see how long it takes to get set up, then we have plenty of different projects that do involve the Nugget on Hack 5.
So now let's take it a step up.
This setup is a Raspberry Pi 400, which is basically just a Raspberry Pi crammed into a keyboard. And I've also attached a gaming mouse. My biggest complaint about the Raspberry Pi 400 is it doesn't come with a trackpad, so you cannot use it just by itself with an operating system on it, unless you want to just do command line only. I think you can actually find Raspberry Pi 400s still available, but the big disadvantage, besides the lack of a trackpad, is the fact that it doesn't support native Wi-Fi like capture or any of the monitor mode things you would want to do for Wi-Fi hacking. So a lot of the other Raspberry Pis do. It's just that it is harder to find them right now. So I'm using an example that does not support Wi-Fi capture with the Nexmon driver, which typically allows anything, even including the Raspberry Pi 0W, in order to put itself into monitor mode and do some really interesting, cool things. I'm going to be using an external wireless network adapter, as you imagine a lot of people will. So that way you can have any sort of Linux device that has a USB port and follow along, provided that you can put that wireless network adapter into monitor mode. Today, I'm going to be using a Panda wireless. It's a POU09. This I like because it is not subtle at all. I have been actually almost kicked out of a like a co-working space because I was using this plus another wireless network adapter that looked equally conspicuous, and some tech bros sitting next to me ratted me out for using too many wireless network adapters and thought I was up to some sort of hacking. So I actually had to talk to the person at the co-working space and explain myself over this thing. So if you are looking to go with a subtle option, this is not it. If you are looking for a dual band, meaning 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz wireless network adapter that has two antennas that you can also plug into like a directional antenna, like a parabolic grid or like a panel antenna in order to track devices down, this is absolutely it. The versatility of this tool I think is really great because, you know, it hits both the 5 gigahertz and the 2.4. People ask for that a lot. And it also has the ability to attach the directional antennas, which people also ask for all the time. So I would say this is probably one of my favorite, like low cost, wireless network adapters that I would not really mind if it got smashed because it's very cheap. While I prefer Alpha Wireless for a lot of reasons, this is one that I use as like a kind of a throwaway device that I throw in my luggage so often that it's what I'm going to be using today because the drivers are actually really good for it and it allows you to just kind of get started with a plug and play sort of deal. So I'm going to plug it in. So it's plugged in, very subtle. And I am using Manjaro. It's an Arch-based operating system that you can run on the Raspberry Pi if you want to completely stay out of the fight of whether Kali, Ubuntu, or Raspberry Pi OS are the best operating system for the Raspberry Pi. I hate that fight, so I decided to pick something that was like relatively obscure, but I find I actually love my experience with Manjaro on a Raspberry Pi. It generally works pretty well for all the things I need to do. I can run attacks on it when I'm doing simulations, and it tends to be very, very stable. The only thing is it is Arch-based, so the package manager is different. It's Pacman instead of like APT, and there's a couple other things you need to get used to as well. Linux commands will work, you know, pretty universally, again, except for the installing commands for just about anything. And most of the tools I'm going to cover today are very easy to install. The first one that I want to kind of show is Kismet. So Kismet has gone through multiple evolutions, and it's something that is like, I would consider to be like a wireless intelligence or like a signals intelligence platform that lets you get very interesting information about wireless devices around you. So it also has a number of built-in like alerts that are looking for very common Wi-Fi attacks. So as a signals intelligence tool, it is also capable of Wardriving. So if you're running Kismet and you add a GPS unit, then boom, you suddenly have the ability to record everything on a very minute scale. So that means you can record Bluetooth devices, you can record people's Wi-Fi clients, like their cell phones and stuff. Whereas there is a way to do this with the devices we were talking about before, the microcontrollers. It just means that you're not able to typically record as much detail about these sorts of devices. So it is possible to do Wardriving on a smaller platform, but I find that Kismet, it really shines because there's built-in analytics and you can really drill down on what a specific device is doing.
Would you use a Raspberry Pi as you're doing Wardriving? Would you just take your Mac or?
Depends on the platform. So if I'm war flying, then Alex and I recently did a video on how you can use an ESP8266 and like a $3 little GPS unit that's connected to it, plus an SD card, to fly around and do Wardriving. And we were actually able to geolocate a single person's device as they were walking around like a really big park.
When you say flying around, are you in a plane or are you in a drone? What do you mean?
Yeah, so a little DJI Mini 2 is what we're flying around with. And being able to attach like a super, super small device to the bottom of that and fly around is really, really cool. But you don't get as much detail as you would with the Raspberry Pi. So if I was driving around, I would say a Raspberry Pi combined with the USB GPS unit is by far the easiest way to get started with Wardriving. There's no like soldering or attaching the way that you would with our little like drone flying thing. So for a beginner, a Raspberry Pi with just a very, very simple, very cheap USB-based GPS unit is the easiest thing to do. The Raspberry Pi typically supports Bluetooth as well, means that you can also start doing things like tracking vehicles by, you know, they're connecting Bluetooth or some of these other things that are very easy to track, but a little microcontroller wouldn't be able to do.
You said you got videos on those topics, right?
Yep. We have videos on using the microcontroller to do war flying and actually track the location of a device. And we also have using a Raspberry Pi as a war driving or war flying tool. The main Raspberry Pis you would see, like the Raspberry Pi 3, Raspberry Pi 4, like they will support just having their own internal card go into monitor mode and do a lot of the tasks we're going to cover today. But the Raspberry Pi 400 doesn't, which is another reason why I don't like it that much. But we're using it as our example today. So let's go ahead and first take a look at the wireless cards that are available. I can use IPA, or I actually prefer ifconfig. We can see that we have the internal WLAN 0, but we also have the one that we just plugged in. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it. I'm going to do sudo airmon ng start and then paste. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking the wireless network adapter and I'm putting it into monitor mode. So it's going to stop listening for wireless networks to join, and instead it's going to do what I say to do. All right, this is now in the proper mode, so we can do sudo Kismet, and it's going to hate that. It doesn't like it when you sudo it, but I like to sudo things because I like them to work when we do demos, so that's what we're going to do. For anybody who's used to the old version of Kismet, it was command line only, so like a big string of like kind of characters would be kind of going through, but that's not the way it works anymore. Now it has a web interface, and that web interface is really cool and interesting. We're going to try to open it up on the Raspberry Pi, but actually, if I don't want to, there's a very cool trick here that I kind of want to show off. Let me see if I can do that. So if I do ifconfig again, I can see that I am actually connected over internet here. So if I were to type in 192.168.0.200 and then this port over here, I could actually access this from any different device on the same network. So if I have my Raspberry Pi running and doing capturing and stuff and it's being slow, like my Raspberry Pi is being slow, I can go over to my Mac OS system, and if I go to Firefox, go to 192.168.0.200 and then the port number 2501, boom, look at that. So I'm actually accessing my Raspberry Pi over the network through this really clean web interface. So let's go ahead and add a source so that we can actually start pulling data. So I'm going to go to the menu here. I'm going to go to data sources, and then I should have a bunch of built-in data sources that I can just start capturing from. Let's do something weird. So we have some available interfaces like Bluetooth. So that's one that I wasn't even planning on capturing, but if we enable the source, so it's now starting to display things. I'm going to show all devices, and I can see these are all Bluetooth devices. It's actually picking up the names of some of them. It's attempting to identify the manufacturer, and I can zoom in to see more individual information. And if I want to click on one of these Bluetooth devices, I can click on them and see more information about it. You know, like I can see it's made by Ubiquiti, it's BLE, I can see the channel, the frequency, all this interesting stuff, as well as a packet graph. It's a really interesting way of being able to take a peek into the wireless spectrum. So right now we're just looking at Bluetooth. Let's go ahead and add Wi-Fi as well. So I'm going to go to the data sources, and we're going to select our wireless network adapter that we just put into monitor mode. I'm going to select this. I'm going to click enable source, and then boom, we now have tons of Wi-Fi data that's coming in, and I'm going to start filtering this for just Wi-Fi, so we can just see things that are more relevant. Now we have Wi-Fi access points, and these are all graphed in ways that we can make customized. So if I want to see only things that are very close to us, I can do the sorting by signal strength and see, oh, this is outside. This is my outside project that's broadcasting the current temperature as a Wi-Fi network. And I'm able to see that that's relatively close by signal strength. And I can see that that's made by Espressif, which is the microcontroller I'm using to run this project in our backyard. So I'm able to very quickly learn information that, okay, it's not connected to another access point. It's its own client. It doesn't have security. It is using an Espressif microcontroller to make it. That's a lot of information to be able to get from just starting up your Wi-Fi card and listening in. So as we get to the more complicated things, we can look at some of these networks that are being broadcast and start learning about them. So if I choose to click on one of these networks here, I can learn more information about it. So I can see the channel that they're on. I can see how much data they're exchanging, and I'll click on this one, and I can see it's called Nexus 5. I can see information about what frequency it's on, but if I click on Wi-Fi, this is where things start getting kind of cool. So I can see that it's probed for other SSIDs, so it's looked around for other networks. I can see it has a fingerprint for its beacons, and right now it looks like there are associated clients. So this means that I can basically see that there's shared hardware uptime, so that means that this is actually broadcasting 2 access points at the same time from the same device. So that's actually true. This is a router that's broadcasting on 2 different antennas. So that's really cool that I can group together 2 access points that might actually be different by studying their packet uptime. So what this means, and there's a little question mark here that explains it, is Wi-Fi access points advertise a high precision timestamp in beacons. Multiple devices with similar timestamps are typically part of the same physical access point. That could be multiple different Wi-Fi names, but it's actually the same router that's broadcasting them. And that's really cool that you can use this tool to identify that. So then we can see associated clients. So we can see every device that is currently connected to that access point, and we can see what it is. So we can see an Intel Corporation device. We can see a Vizio. We can see another Intel, and we can then break out and start analyzing any of these individual networks that we want to learn more about. Let's say that we want to learn more about, as I keep going through these, an Apple device. Yeah, let's see this. So we now have identified an Apple device, and I want to know more about this Apple device that is connected to our Nexus 5 network. So I'm going to click on Client Details, and it opens up a new window that lets me start probing into what this client has been up to. So I can also go here and see different access points that it has joined in the past. So I can see here, it's actually a member of 2 different networks. It has switched between these 2 different access points in the past. So I know that this individual Apple device has the password for both of these networks stored inside of it because it's been observed connecting to both of them. Isn't that crazy that as somebody
just like
that yeah, you can just see into this invisible spectrum and start understanding the relationships between these different clients and access points. So instead of just having it all via text and trying to see which ones line up with which ones, this makes it so much of a more rich interface to understand that sort of thing. It also comes with alerts. And this is where you can see, for example, alerts about a Hack 5 product running nearby. I scared myself so badly using Kismet one time when I plugged in a Wi-Fi pineapple and it automatically started running a karma attack, because that's one of the attacks that this automatically detects. So currently it's just telling me you shouldn't use this as root. I told you it would complain. But if I actually start running an attack, then I should be able to detect it using Kismet and get an alert that something sketchy is happening. So I'm going to take the Wi-Fi Nugget, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to target one of these networks first by scanning and then by selecting the access point, and I'm going to start kicking a specific device off of the network. Now, if Kismet's doing its job, it should generate an alert and tell me that some nefarious activity is going on. A known attack is underway. So let's say I'm some kid that has a Deauthor wristwatch. I've selected an access point to attack, and I am now going to go for it. So I've selected the attack. I have deauthentication selected, and I'm firing. So at this point, I'm sending deauthentication attacks, and this is very noisy. This is an attack that's super easy for most people to detect because it involves sending a bunch of packets that are not typically exchanged on a network if everything is going fine. There we go. We got an alert. So that didn't take very long. Access point, blah, 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 broadcast deauthentication or disassociation of all clients. Either an AP is shutting down or this is indicative of a possible denial of service attack. That's because it is. I am denying service. So let's go ahead and try another one. I'm going to start trying a beacon frame attack. So what that's going to do is it is actually going to broadcast a bunch of different access points, all from the same MAC address. Well, it actually might not do it from the same MAC address, but it's going to broadcast a bunch of fake access points. And let's see if maybe Kismet is able to detect it. Now, this is typically able to detect a Wi-Fi pineapple that's doing the same type of behavior. But in this case, I believe that this program is designed to create a new fake MAC address for every fake network, and that will probably get around the alerts here, which I don't see an alert. So I think that we're flying under the radar here, even though, as you can see, never going to give you up, never going to say goodbye. These are obviously fake networks that we're creating, and Kismet isn't really sure that these are fake networks because they all have a different MAC address. This attack looks like it's going pretty well, and we're able to make it pretty convincing that Kismet's not able to see what's going on, but we were able to prove pretty definitively that Kismet can detect some of these common attacks like the deauthentication attack, and that's what that alert right here was talking about. So very cool to see Kismet being on top of these sorts of attacks. So if you're curious that maybe your neighbor or something is attacking you, you could very quickly see whether or not you are really under attack by running Kismet on a Raspberry Pi. And like I said, I'm on my MacBook Pro connected over the same network, just looking at this over a browser. So that's really how far these sorts of signals intelligence platforms have come.
Kismet can also do attacks, right?
No, Kismet is completely passive. So Kismet is best described as like a passive signals intelligence platform that allows you to see relationships and some types of attacks in progress. Although, so it can do a lot, but it is not an active platform, meaning it's not actually sending out any platforms in order to do what it does, which is great because if you're somebody who's worried about getting caught, running Kismet, for example, on a Raspberry Pi while you're walking through like a sensitive area is not going to be detected because the Raspberry Pi isn't putting out any packets.
So it's just passively listening.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people will be interested in seeing how to attack. So have you got like another tool up your sleeve that can show us how to attack?
Yeah, so all right, the next tool that we're going to focus on is an offensive tool. We are going to run a tool called Airgeddon. It's a framework that allows you to use all these cool Wi-Fi hacking tools and techniques that are out there without actually needing to do the command line work on pretty much any of them. It's something that allows you to very, very easily kind of like fill in the form depending on what kind of attack you want to use. And it is so beginner friendly. I really like it for doing all sorts of demonstrations. So this is alien themed. And it's important to know that because the person who made it is very consistent and particular. You'll see the alien theme pretty consistently throughout this entire program. And I think it's really funny. The easiest way to do this is just install it via like Snap or apt install or pacman install if you're on Kali or something else that has all the offensive sources installed. It's really easy to install because it's been around so long that it's been added to these repositories, although it has a lot of dependencies because it's just using these tools that are very well established, like Hashcat and some of the other things that you would have experience with if you've been working with Wi-Fi hacking stuff. So let's show it off and see what exactly it looks like. Just do sudo Airgeddon, and boom, we're into our first spaceship. There will be more. So it's going to do a quick scan and try to detect the resolution. In this case, it can't find it. It'll try to find out what I'm on, and it sees that I'm on Arch Linux. And I'm going to press enter in order for it to go through and identify every different subtool that it's going to need to have installed in order to do its job. So this is where the first list of things you have to have, and the second list is optional tools. In this case, I worked very hard and long into the night to get all of these to say okay before this presentation. The typical installation will have most of the required things, but not very many of the optional tools, which allow you to do some of these really interesting and cool attacks. So if you want to get this fully working, you're going to have to go through and apt install T-Shark, apt install MDK4, or some of these other ones you see on the screen in order to get everything working the way that you see I have it working. But let's go through and see what happens next. So we already put our card into monitor mode. We can see that that is card number 4. So I'm going to select that as the card we're working with. And this is really cool because you can just go through this process, select the card you want to work with and then select the attack you want. It's very, very easy, very straightforward, and works the same for virtually any attack flow that you're working on. So here we go. We have our main attack window. We can select a different network interface if we messed it up. We can put our interface into monitor mode if it's not already, or we can put our interface into managed mode. So if I wanted to switch this over so it can connect to a Wi-Fi network again, I can select option 3 and boom, we have it back into the standard mode that it starts out in. So then we have our denial of service attack menu, which is where we can decide if we want to basically do a protocol-based jamming attack on someone's Wi-Fi network by sending deauthentication or disassociation attacks. If I go to option number 4, we can see the complete list here, and we can see we can do AMOC and MDK4, which is a script that I've previously downloaded. And what this is doing is basically pre-formatting the command lines that you need in order to run these tools and then running them under the script. So it's basically an organizing script that has all these tools installed and will run them for you depending on this very user-friendly kind of questionnaire that it leads you through. So we can do the deauthentication/disassociation, Deauth AirPlay, WID, WIPS, WDS confusion attack. Those are the ones that tend to work. And then we have the not very effective attacks like the beacon flood attack, the auth DOS attack, and the Michael shutdown exploitation attack, which I have to point out has nothing to do with our editor, Michael. I'm sorry, Michael. So those are all the deauthentication attacks. And of course, these will light up Kismet like a Christmas tree. So if you start using any of these, you can expect to be discovered in pretty short order just because, yeah, they are not quiet attacks. All right, so if I press 0, then I can go back to the main menu and I can see we have some offline like cracking attacks for once we grab a handshake, but we need to grab the handshake in order to do that. So if we want to see how one of these works, we can do a standard handshake grabbing attack. We press 5 and we can see if we want to do it via PMKID or handshake. The value of a PMKID attack is that we can grab a Wi-Fi network's handshake without actually needing a client present. So let's go ahead and try that one because it's by far the easiest one to do. And if that doesn't work, we can always do a standard handshake capture, but that means a client needs to be present for us to deauthenticate, and often not the case, which is no fun. All right, so here we are exploring for targets. So what it's going to do is quickly look around and attempt to find any access points or any clients that we can target with this attack. And once it is done with that, then we'll be able to select one. So I'm gonna press Control-C. All right, we now have a list of various access points that we can attack. There's one that's marked with an asterisk and it's called Michael's Net. I'm gonna attack that one because the asterisk means that it would be a very easy network for us to attack and get a client handshake from. If I select option number 7 and then press Enter, it will confirm that I have a valid target and confirm that I have the attack ready to go. I'll press Enter again in order to enter a timeout for when the script should stop attacking. I'm going to say 25 seconds. And then I should be able to press Enter to begin the PMKID attack. So we see this little tiny window open up in the side. It is now executing the attack. And of course, like this is part of another script. So this script is just controlling, a PMKID based attack that I've also had installed. And the value here is that it's doing it for me. It looks great. It looks as though it is doing a good job at attempting the attack without any intervention once I put in the necessary information. So what this is really doing is just walking you through each step and making sure that, you get a pretty good shot at grabbing it. In this case, we failed. So if that is the case and we did in fact fail, we can go back and we can attempt a handshake capture. We can see it's actually auto-selected the target. So now it's still up at the top. I don't need to go through the process of selecting the target again unless I want to change targets. So if I want to do a handshake capture instead, I can try number 6 because our PMKID attack didn't work. I can say I want to do a deauthentication attack against it. So I'll select option number 1. That's the actual tool we're going to be using in order to kick devices off of that network. And we'll use a timeout of 25 seconds again. So we're going to press Enter. We'll see some windows pop up. It's going to start listening and attacking simultaneously. And this is the attack that I love to do. If people are looking over my shoulder, it looks very scary to have all these like red and white windows be like popping up and attempting to do things. It's going to run for about 25 seconds. And if it doesn't get a handshake, then that's okay. It's served its purpose. But anyway, so this is the process that you go through in order to use Airgeddon to launch an attack like grabbing a handshake. And once we have that handshake, we could then select another tool in the module.
You said that you installed stuff in the background. Those are the required and optional stuff that it was saying okay to, is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, so it'll tell you what the name of the package that needs to be installed is. In general, that is the best way to go through and make sure all the installed things are present before running and doing any of the more advanced attacks. So it looks like it actually worked. It was just lagging. So I'm going to press no to not cancel. I'm going to write, it actually did get a handshake. Look at that. So that's great. I'm going to press Enter to accept the default script, and we can see that we now have a valid handshake, and I can go back to the main menu. So just like that, we were able to capture a handshake on this network. And if I wanted to do an offline decryption of the password, I can press 6. We can see that we have the handshake file already selected. Now I would need to have a password list. We have a number of different options of how we can attack this. Since I've installed all of them, we can do a dictionary attack, or we can do a rules-based attack. Rules-based attacks allow you to generate passwords. We're not going to try that. So we're going to select option 1 because I know that's installed and works. We're going to use the selected capture file, and then it's going to ask for the path to a dictionary file. So if I have a dictionary file, what I can do is just drop the text file that I want to run the attack with in here. So I'm going to take the top 4,800 passwords. I'm going to extract this password list, and then that is what I will be feeding into this script here in order to do a very standard password cracking attack against this network. And I'm assuming this network has a crazy hard password, so it's not going to be able to get it. But that's okay, because it still shows the way that this works. So I'm going to extract it. I'm going to show the files, and then I'm going to drag and drop it into the terminal window. All right, there we go. So just like that, super easy, we were able to drag and drop a list of 4,800 probable passwords into the script. We're going to press Enter to start it going. And look at that. just within this tool, we've been able to grab a handshake and then throw it into AirCrackNG and use a password list I previously downloaded to attempt to get it. Now, we didn't get this password because this is Michael's net. It's just not going to be some easy password. I'm sure it's something super hard that he's never used anywhere else before. So we're not going to actually try to go any further with this particular network. I'm going to go with option number 7 in order to access the Evil Twin attack menu. Now, there's a number of different options here, but we are going to go with my all-time favorite, and that is option number 9. Now, this will make someone think that their access point is malfunctioning, and it'll spawn up an access point with the exact same name but no password. When the victim connects, they will be presented with a screen that makes it look like their router is undergoing an update. And if they put in the wrong password, it will continue to deny them access to their old network. It'll only allow them to get back online when they put in the correct password. First, we're going to select option 9 and perform an exploration where we start looking for different targets to attack. We'll need to be looking in particular for different networks that have somebody actually on them, because nobody can type in the password to our rogue access point if nobody's actually using the internet on this network. So I'm going to let this go for a little bit here, and I can also see more information about the different networks that are being detected if I want to expand this window. But when it's done, what I can do is press the X up here in order to generate a list of all the different networks that I've discovered.
A few moments later.
Okay, now I can see at number 12, there's an option called My Testy. And I think that is the network that we're going to be attacking today. So I'm selecting option number 12, and the first thing it's going to ask is whether or not I want to attack it in a variety of different ways. And in this case, I'm going to select option 1, which is going to be doing a deauthentication and disassociation attack using a tool called MDK4. The second option is whether or not I want to do denial of service pursuit mode. So that means that if this network starts changing channels to try to avoid me, I can actually follow it. And for the demo, I'm going to select no, but this is a very handy option. Next up, it's going to ask me if I want to spoof my MAC address. And if I want to hide my identity, this is a really good idea. But in this case, I'm not going to do it just for the simplicity of the demo. Now it's asking us whether or not we have a handshake file for our target. This is important because if they give us the wrong password, we won't know otherwise. So this is what I think makes this script so advanced, the ability to grab and compare to this handshake while the victim is putting in passwords. I'm going to select N because I don't have a handshake yet. I'll have to select a value in seconds for how long I want this to run. So I'm going to select about, let's say, 25 seconds. And then it is going to attempt to grab a handshake from kicking the device off that is currently on this network, which is actually my computer. It looks like it's got a handshake I can see over in the corner, so that's good news. This attack is now underway, and I've gained the ability to verify whether my victim is giving me the correct password when I phish them later. So I've got a little congratulations here. I can press enter to save that handshake, and then I can press enter again in order to proceed to the next step. And this is interesting because it's set to channel 44, which is a 5 gigahertz network channel. So we are actually attacking a 5 gigahertz network channel right now. So a little bit of 5 gigahertz hacking right here. The path is valid. I have write permissions. I can continue with the script. And now the real fun begins. This script gives me the ability to select any language I want to attempt to phish my victim. So depending where I am, I might want to select maybe Portuguese if I'm in Brazil, or maybe I want French if I'm in France. It's really up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and select English because I'm going to be boring today. I'm going to press enter, and this is going to kick off a flurry of activity. Lots of windows are going to be opened, and we're going to see all sorts of reactions and such as soon as I put this up. So let's go ahead and see what happens. It's going to open all these windows. I feel very cool and hackerish every time I do this because it has to create an access point, manage the access point and everything that happens when a client connects to it, and then start a deauthentication attack, which is going to absolutely decimate the Wi-Fi for anybody who is using My Testy. So on my victim computer, I am now kicked off of My Testy. I cannot join it. Something is wrong. But I can also see that there is an access point, an open access point that has the same name. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to that access point, and we're going to see exactly what happens when I do that on the screen of our hacking computer. Okay, we can see that we've got some activity here, and in fact, on my victim device, I am now seeing wireless network My Testy, enter your wireless network password to get internet access. This is a pretty simple phishing page. There's not a lot of fanciness here, but as a victim, I'm going to go ahead and type in something wrong. So I'm just going to type in some gibberish, and then I'm going to hit submit. And let's see what happens on our attacker computer when the victim is just giving you a random password. The password is incorrect, redirecting to the main screen. So it actually knew this. It was able to figure out that this was the wrong password. Let's say I've given up. All right, that convinced me. This thing actually is my router. It knows when I give it the fake password. So I'm going to put in the real one. Let's see what happens. The password is correct. The connection will be reestablished. Oh, and then the network shuts down. I'm redirected back to my old connection, and I'm able to connect normally. And just like that, I can see here that I've managed to gain the password, which is password 123. I managed to successfully get the password for this network. And I was able to do that by just actually kind of listening here while presenting a situation that seemed likely. And that was all it took to convince someone who'd been kicked off of their network from accepting that, hey, my router is just doing this update. It needs my help in order to improve the security. And it even has that special advanced twist where if a victim gets wise to the attack and tries to put in a wrong password or a fake password, the script is so smart it will be able to tell the difference between the real password and the fake one by grabbing a Wi-Fi handshake in advance and having it ready to compare. So we'll try an evil twin AP attack with sniffing. So this is going to be a much more simple attack, creates a fake access point, and then allows you to sniff on that access point by doing DNS spoofing. So we're going to select option number 6. So we're going to kick the victim off of the real network while we set up this fake one. So rather than just relying on somebody getting curious about a Wi-Fi network, we're actually going to kick them off the old one. So we'll select option number 1 for a disassociation attack. We are going to also be able to do denial of service pursuit mode, which means if a device starts switching over to other networks, we can follow it by tracking its MAC address. So yeah, hell yeah. If it starts running from us, we're going to track it and start attacking it persistently. We're going to select our adapter. That is going to be used to host an access point as well. This card is being put into monitor mode, and we need another interface with internet access. And this is necessary for allowing kind of like a pass-through. So I'm going to select the Ethernet because we're plugged into Ethernet. And again, this is going to be acting as an evil twin network that's like sniffing for like what the user is doing. So we're providing them a real internet connection, but we are also trying to sneakily watch over their shoulder. Here we have a summary of everything that's going on. We are attacking the SSID Michaelsnet. The card is in monitor mode. We are on DOS pursuit mode, which means we'll be able to like track it around. Let's see if this actually works. So sometimes it'll also ask us if we were doing like a phishing attack, whether we want a specific language. So that is a feature that you can do here if you're looking to attack like people who don't specifically speak English within the Airgeddon suite. Unfortunately, of course, it's not working this time, but let's go ahead and try to also spoof our MAC address. We're going to store a file with any captured passwords and confirm that this is where we want to save it. The thing that I don't like about Airgeddon is it asks you so many damn questions, you know? Like it's really like, it's persistent about like checking and making sure. And here we have, all right, multiple windows are going to be open, the attack's ready. And then when you're done, press enter on this window and the script will automatically close. So we're going to try kind of like a phishing attack and boom, it has hard crash, bad array subscript, and it has completely failed. So as you can see, Airgeddon sometimes has issues when you're trying more complicated attacks. What it was trying to do there was like start up an access point and then do DNS spoofing on it and then like listening on everything while routing everything through the legitimate traffic. And the poor little Raspberry Pi just couldn't handle it. Or alternatively, Airgeddon just needs to be updated. Again, the script is like quite old, but you can see that there's a variety of different things that all work on it, with one last one being the one that I want to show off. So let me show one that's a little cooler. So if this is installed correctly, this is probably the fastest attack that you can execute that can possibly get you a password on a Raspberry Pi running Airgeddon. So running back through this really quickly, yes, I still have everything installed. It's going to ask me what card I want to use. We're going to use the one we put into, well, that was previously in monitor mode. I'm going to put it into monitor again by selecting option number 2. And this time we're going to be looking at a pixie dust attack. So option number 8 is the WPS attack menu. WPS is a convenience feature that is baked into a lot of Wi-Fi routers that can be inherently vulnerable in ways that allows an attacker to break in a matter of seconds. So what we're going to do is perform a quick network scan and try to identify some targets here and see if any of them might be vulnerable to this attack. Let's go ahead and press enter. It's going to go ahead and start scanning and looking for any vendors that are vulnerable to the WPS setup pin attack. And once we get that list, we can select one of them and try launching this. Now, I would say about between 40 and 60% of routers are vulnerable to this attack, depending on location. If you're in an area that has a lot of very recently updated or recently issued routers from an internet service provider, it'll probably be disabled. If they haven't been refreshed in quite some time, this attack will probably be valid. So I'm going to go ahead and press Control-C in order to move on to the next step. And I can see we have a number of different targets that might be vulnerable to this attack. So I'm going to select the one with the strongest signal strength. And it looks like it's a direct Wi-Fi network from like a printer or something like that. So we're going to attempt an attack here using, first we're going to try the Pixie dust attack using Bully. So we can use Bully or Reaver. We'll probably try both and see if they work. So we're going to go ahead and set a timeout for maybe 30 seconds. We're going to set a path to store the saved passwords if we do manage to get it. And we can see all parameters are set. Let's start the attack. So this little red script will come out. We can see there's data being exchanged with the router. And if this data exchange leaks critical information, and this is actually via bad randomization. The developers here picked all zeros as a random seed when they were making this program. So if that is the case, then we can use that bad random seed to actually guess the password based on what's being exchanged right here. So this attack, again, typically works very quickly if it's going to work. So my indication is it might not work on this target. So our options then are, we've timed out on this one. We can see that it is not going to work, so press Control-C or just press Enter here to end the attack. And we can then select a different method. Okay, so when we select the Reaver attack, we can try the WPS Pixie attack from a different program. And sometimes I'll find that it works better or not at all on one, where it'll completely work on the other. So it's always worth trying both attack methods. So if we're able to successfully launch this attack, then when it runs, it will be able to retrieve the password, which allows us access to the router. And basically, if we get this pin, no matter what the user does, changes the router password or tries to kick us out, it will not work. We will always be able to log in with this hard-coded pin that is literally on the bottom of the router. Now, it is actually possible to disable this by going into the settings and making sure that it is turned off. But often I found that different routers will say that they've disabled this pin, but not actually do it, which means a hacker could still get access even if you change the password repeatedly. For the amount of time and the sophistication of this attack, I would say this is probably the best attack out there for quickly getting a Wi-Fi password via just straight up hacking. But I would say for investment, it would probably be not as effective all the time versus something like a phishing attack, which over time will have a much more positive result.
That's brilliant, Kody. I know demos are so hard, and I mean we've edited the video to make it like hide some of the hassle that you've gone through. And I mean I know you stayed up to like 4 a.m. to get this demo done. So just from me and my point of view, I just really want to thank you for putting this together and making it easy for us, the audience, just to watch you. You make it look so easy, and I know it's not.
Yeah, I love Wi-Fi hacking tools, and I've been working with them for a long time. A lot of them do have downsides. Like Airgeddon managed to crash the Raspberry Pi when it was totally fine running Kismet and some other tools. I've even run Wireshark on this Raspberry Pi, and it's worked just fine. So there's definitely some trade-offs here when it comes to some of these Wi-Fi hacking tools, but some of the more advanced ones that typically would be run on like a laptop bare metal like Airgeddon will definitely suffer in performance when they're done on a low-cost device like a Raspberry Pi. So I appreciate everybody sitting through these demonstrations and also opening your minds to what's possible with these low-cost devices, even though, again, they definitely have some trade-offs compared to a speedy laptop with a lot of horsepower that's able to do these same things a lot faster.
That's brilliant, Kody. Just want to say thanks and appreciate you spending all this time with us. Please go and follow Kody on Twitter. Please subscribe to his YouTube channel. Kody, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here, and I hope I'll be back soon.